So, Michael, we were touching upon this in the last hour, but it bears a little more examination. The Republican Party right now is in a full-on panic because of Donald Trump. And despite the fact that they're in a full-on panic, they still cannot get up. Now, let's just go over this, right? Earlier in the week, we had, or I should say at the end of last week, we have Donald Trump coming out. And, it's the beginning of the week. Donald Trump comes out and basically says, listen, I want to make this absolutely clear. I am a fascist. And step one in my program, after I malign Mexicans, after I talk about building a huge wall, after et cetera, we're going to stop immigration based upon people's religion. In fact, we're not going to stop immigration. We're not even going to let American citizens back into the country if they're Muslims. So it's not really immigration. And we're not going to stop vacations, et cetera, et cetera. And what does the Republican Party do? Let's go through this. All right, Ted Cruz comes out and says, well, I have a different policy.
I have some slight refinements on the complete fascism plan.
Right. We have Paul Ryan saying, well, that's not what I would do. We have John Kasich saying, that's sort of un-American-ish. We have Jeb Bush sending out their spokespeople to talk about it. I mean, on and on and on. Ben Carson says, I don't know if I would do that.
A bit different.
Right, exactly. But then they are asked the next question. Do you still support him if he is your nominee? And to a person, they all say, yes, sir, of course. Of course. We don't like fascism, but we're not going to vote against it. I mean, give me a break. And the amazing thing that we're seeing here is that Donald Trump then turns around. And as soon as these people are in a position to actually criticize him, and, look, there's two things going on here. If Marco Rubio said what Donald Trump said, and he's not that far from saying it, let's face it. I mean, Lindsey Graham, anything in the Middle East with all in front of it should be bombed. John McCain, 8 years, bomb Iran. I mean, let's face it. We're not that far. Jeb Bush, we should have religious tests for Syrian immigrants. None of them are that far from pushing it. The reason why they're attacking Trump on this is because they need to get Trump out of the race. But they can't go so far as to say that I think he's despicable. Like he is a toxic Republican general election nominee, because he's not. There's no such thing to them. There's nothing that is possibly toxic enough for them not to support the Republican nominee. Well, Trump, what does Trump do? As soon as they're even put in a position to criticize him, what does he do? Which slams them down immediately. Tell me, Michael, what does he do? And it has to do with the number 68%.
Yeah, 68% of Donald Trump's supporters are interested in him running as an independent. And open to that idea.
All he has to do is tweet that figure, and they all cower like children.
Because the whole dynamic has been shifted. If you think of the old story of the Republican elites hustling the rubes, that's a traditional narrative of Republican politics, which is, people like the Bush family and the elites, they get the people who are freaked out about, death metal concerts or whatever to organize the precincts and get them out to vote. Starting, maybe this is more recent, starting with Sarah Palin and through the Tea Party, even though there aren't really big policy differences, they're all far-right crazies, but stylistically and tonally and presentationally, that base wants the respect, and they want to run the show now, and Donald Trump is perfectly calibrated to channel their attitudes and their emotional reactions, which is really fundamentally all it is. I mean, when you look even at Michael Steele said to you, he said, people are afraid of these attacks. On Fox, they're saying Obama doesn't get that people are angry. It's all emotional tone. And Donald Trump is the perfect belligerent, egotistical, angry, sarcastic. He is this, Archie Bunker with over $1 billion.
Right.
Perfect.
That's right.
And they cannot hold him accountable because they've cultivated this base, and now it has power, and they don't know how to handle it.
And they are in a panic because they know that if this guy is on the top of the ticket, that he will cause the Republicans to not only lose the Senate, but to probably lose some seats. Maybe not the House totally, but probably lose the House. I mean, some seats in the House. And here's the thing, and I want to address this, and then I want to move on. Because the Republicans are later in the program, or I've talked to Ari Berman about their attempts to destroy one man, one vote. But the idea, some people are concerned that Donald Trump is, when he drops out, if he drops out or if he leaves the race, and I don't know that he will at this point, that he is in some way going to make the Republicans look moderate. And the fascinating thing is, like I said, in the areas in which he is going to the extreme, he is not going very much further than the Republicans have gone anyways, and they have plenty of space to do that. When they start talking about Muslims and invading other countries, there is nothing they have been able to say or do, frankly, that the media will hold them account to. There was a New York Times piece earlier in the week talking about how they were looking to Ted Cruz voters, and a Ted Cruz voter said was talking about supporting Ted Cruz, and the reporter wrote that this guy, Bill Stevenson, supports Ted Cruz. Bill Stevenson, a made-up name. I can't remember the guy's name at this point. But this guy supports Ted Cruz because of Ted Cruz's muscular and unambiguous position on what to do.
Did the Cruz supporter thoughtfully draw on his pipe after using those words?
Right,
what
exactly.
Are you talking about?
Exactly. Except for that was not a quote, right? That's the reporter. Now, the reporter could have also used the words hysterical and simplistic instead of
irrational
unambiguous
and
muscular, right? He could have said irrational and belligerent. He could have described Ted Cruz's positions in a way that was far more accurate.
Right.
Whereas he says the Democrats' response is muddled because it is in some way, or he could have said the Democratic response is nuanced and within perspective. But the reporters are so hungry for some type of war that the Republicans get away with saying any of this stuff. And when it comes to immigration, look, that's completely polarized anyways. There's no space. There's nobody who's going to be on the Republican side, at least in the Republican primary, who could say anything that's too outlandish.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
does everybody remember Jeb Bush going down? He said, I'm talking about anchor babies, and then going down to the border and said, well, actually, I'm talking about Asians.
I'm talking about
give me a
Asians.
break.
That's the great moderate response. I'm not talking about all Mexicans. I'm talking about Asian people.
Right. Now,
very moderate. I think, and this has been the experience. You've talked about it many times. I've had the experience in a couple of different other media outlets myself of people, including some very liberal people, actually saying, over the summer, well, Donald Trump just said this horrible thing, or when Ben Carson was the flavor of the month, he made another Holocaust comparison. This is really going to hurt him. With who?
Right.
Who's this going to hurt him with?
Right.
It's a complete inability to recognize and be real about the Republican base.
Now, if the Republican Party, and I'm going to tell the Republican Party this, and the reason why I'm going to tell the Republican Party this, because there's nothing they can do about it now. The Republican Party is really concerned about coming off as too extreme. Then they should go to their the establishment's wonder boy, who I don't even think is going to get the nomination, frankly, Marco Rubio, and tell him, hey, when you say a woman does not have the right to choose when she has been the victim of rape, or when she has been the victim of incest, or when her life is in danger, you're going to force a woman to remain pregnant, even if it means her death, even if it means bearing the child of an incestuous rapist, her death, then you've got bigger problems on that issue than you do on Donald Trump's fascism, although that's going to stick to them too.